Thank you very much for inviting me over to attend this very high-profile book launch event. Professor Kishore Mahbubani used to be a good friend and perhaps is a good friend because I met him twice in Beijing and in Shanghai, respectively, on separate occasions for different events. And so first off, congratulations, Kishore, for this great book. And I'm already recommending the book to my students in China and also around the world in America. And I hope that they will pick up the book on the Amazon and perhaps they can download for free, right? In this particular case. Once again, thank you very much. Congratulations. And while I was reading the first few chapters, I'm almost awestruck by some of the great remarks and also arguments you have made. And particularly when you talk about this very America with closed minds and that very shocking discovery that these closed minds are actually the liberals, the liberal minds in the American intellectual scenes. And that remark actually reminded me one book I used to teach by Alan Bloom, Professor Alan Bloom of Yale University, and also he taught at the Chicago University. And in this very book, as the title suggests, it's all about the closing of the American mind. So the closing of the American mind can be traced way back to the 1980s. The book came out in 1987, and there are several chapters on the ignorance and also the very backlash against the Renaissance, against the great European, American classics. And so in a sense, I think your book and your argument echoed this very particular thesis in Professor Alan Bloom's book. And so I consider your book not just a book by a former professor, but a book by a thinker. I think you are a thinker. You are now the frontline fighter in this great mental wars in between perhaps Asia and other parts, and perhaps this very formerly dominant European civilization. And so I congratulate you in these great discoveries. For example, the three failures you outlined in this very book, and also you debunking of all these false and perhaps fallacies that has been prevailing over the past century. And so in this case, you delve more so deeply into the very current, the reasons, the causes, and the predicament and the rationale perhaps behind this current crisis situation. So it's not as simple, it's not simply a book of knowledge, but also a book of enlightenment. It's a book that enlightens, and hopefully that this book will be available to as many people, as many readers around as possible. Now, you raised several issues that really kind of make me curious. The first issue I think you raised is the return of Asia, and especially the Renaissance of Asia. I think you try to use the rise of Asia, and which I agree. I think the return of Asia is an important notion, because China, which used to be the center of Asia, used to be the very, very powerful, with other countries in the periphery, and especially the tributary system that has been in place. And so my question is, will the world order return back to this very China-centered Asian order, and with all these smaller countries in the periphery, and with that very tributary system, considering the current trade system, which may make that very, very difficult. The second question I might raise at this very point is that if 20th century is the century of America, I think this is the main argument made by many politicians and even intellectuals. I remember this very argument. I remember this very argument very clearly when Richard Nixon was visiting the UIBE, the University of International Trade and Economics here in Beijing. And he argued that the 20th century is the century of America. But then he also kind of paid a compliment to China and said perhaps the 21st century may be the century of China. And then he added one point, and he said, since the United States is also on the other shore of the Pacific Ocean, and perhaps the United States should also have a fair share of this very dominance, even in the 21st century. And so the question might be, even with the return of China, will China be happy to coexist with the United States at the far end of this very Pacific Ocean? I mean, at the other end of this, on the other shore of the Pacific Ocean, will China be ready to share this very particular dominance? Considering, I mean, given the fact that that transition is so very, very risky and perhaps difficult, as we find, as the situation is unfolding in the U.S. right now. So thank you very much.